Hello, thank you for joining us today on this beautiful Sunday afternoon on May the 29th, 2011. Today we're talking about here on landlordsjournal.com short-term rental units, specifically Locum Tenens and the medical community and their housing needs in our area. We explain what local tenants are and what our goals and aspirations are for this unique group of people. I've always had an interest, and personally, I've always had an interest in short-term rentals, whether they be from this demographic or in hotels or motels. And of course, eventually, we'd like to invest in hotels or motels, and this would kind of give us an idea of how that would work, because it's very similar in structure to a hotel or motel environment. Enjoy the show. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to visit our forums, and we'll be answering them there. Thank you.
Well, hello, America. We're coming to you from 30 Rockefeller Center for another broadcast of landlordsjournal.com.
Our virtual office.
Yes.
We're all avatars.
We're here.
Men with laptops. That's what.
Yeah.
Men with laptops.
That's the name of our show.
Men with laptops. Yes.
What if my name's taken?
They're doing the things that I've instructed them to do on their laptops. So I'll sit here.
You need a laptop.
John, you should have an outtakes just for fun.
I have my laptops.
on session outtakes.
Yeah.
Comments.
After the band.
We talk about different things every week, different little takes on being landlords and real estate and something that we've been interested in our little town that we kind of fell into it a little bit is renting temporary housing for people in healthcare. Our little town is kind of the nidus for healthcare in our catchment area. We have the tertiary care hospitals where most people would come for their specialty care or trauma, but at the same time, our little town is economically challenged, and it is gradually decreasing in population, and we've had with that the hospitals here have a chronic problem with retaining healthcare staff, physicians and ancillary care staff, and they're typically always people coming to work at the local hospitals that are here temporarily. They're brought in by temporary agencies and stay for a little while. And we recently we currently have a tenant in one of our one-bedroom houses that is working for that is working temporarily in town, and they were more than happy to take our place for their temporary assignment, because it was a one-bedroom place and it was kind of all low maintenance, self-contained, and
yeah, when we first got the call, I was suspicious. I mean, we had talked about this before, the Locum Tenens and all that kind of stuff. We had talked about getting into that market, back from the onset of our partnership, or from the beginning of our partnership. But when we first got the call, it just sounded very suspicious. It was we talked about it earlier today. It was foreign number to West Virginia. They said that they were going to take the house sight unseen, pay the deposit, first month's rent, all that kind of thing.
But there were videos and pictures on the web.
There were video and pictures.
It wasn't
Not a site visit.
to
We have a
walk
website
through
of
it.
our, with the
Yeah.
features of our properties, myhuntingtonhome.com. But
Well, we had that happen
They
once
seemed
before,
very-
and it didn't turn out so well.
he seemed too eager.
Yeah,
They seem to-
we
This
had
is
no
we had
problem,
a bad
I need it now,
experience
but
with
I-
over-eagerness.
Right.
But one of the things too, one of the caveats was they didn't want a long-term lease. They just
No.
wanted,
Yeah.
that was one of the different things.
Yeah, they didn't want a long-term lease, and they couldn't find anyone that would do that. Would give them like a short-term lease.
Can I ask a question real quick? Did they actually tell you that they looked at other places and like they found us, and that's why they were kind of interested in us?
They did, because I think we put something on our website that we would do short-term leases.
Okay, and they actually looked at other places, and we fit the bill, but other places didn't.
Right.
I mean, that's great.
Either
I
they
guess
didn't
I
take pets, or we took pets.
I didn't quite realize
they
that,
didn't
I
take.
think.
They didn't take pets.
Until now.
There was something wrong. They didn't accept short-term leases. They didn't accept
Cool.
pets.
So we were
or
able to
something
meet
like
their
that.
need,
Right.
where other local people were not.
Right.
How exciting!
So,
Right.
so here we are. This is a niche market that's kind of a premium market, I think, and it's something that I know a little bit about because I've been a physician myself for 20 years, and I have a good friend that's been a locum tenens. This term locum tenens is the fancy term the doctors use for their temporary, instead of being called a temporary doctor or something, the term is locum tenens, Locum, second word Tenens, and this is locum tenens physicians are physicians that are kind of Johnny on the spot physicians. They will come. They are hired for, but typically they're hired by a hospital, and they will come in when there's a need, a short-term need for their services. Someone may have left. A doctor, say a doctor that is a specialist. Maybe a pathologist at a hospital, which is, for example, I'm just using this as an example. Every hospital has a pathologist, and you need a pathologist at a hospital, but maybe the pathologist that worked there got a better job and left, and so now the hospital needs one, and they need one pretty quickly in order to do their day-to-day business at the hospital. So the hospital will be strapped. They will be sort of like a distressed homeowner. They will quickly need to fill this to continue their services. Or it might be a gynecologist, or it might be a general surgeon. A lot of smaller towns will have one of each that are working at their hospital. So this is something that a small town, not just a larger hospital community, but even a small town community might have this phenomenon where the hospital will need a doctor quickly. So what do? They call a locum tenens agency and say, we need a pathologist starting in 30 days, ongoing, until we find our own. So then the locum tenens agent will list that on their website. They'll list it on physiciansjobs.com or something. They'll say, or they'll have a list. I get this because at one time I was looking into this kind of work myself, and then they will send out mass emails. I get these emails still all the time. Locum tenens pathologists needed in, and they won't tell the town. They'll say locum tenens physician needed in beautiful area a beautiful Ohio Valley town, within driving distance of lovely communities such as Cincinnati, and great golf and great skiing, and
You got to pay a fee.
we need
to
it
get
now.
That, right?
We need it now. We need you to call, and we will set you up. So then the doctor responds, says, I'm a pathologist, and I'd love to see that. I need a job. I'm a pathologist, and I'm finishing up in I'm finishing up at this one-horse town in South Dakota. They have hired their pathologist, so I'm ready and available. And they'll usually tell us, they'll say, West Virginia license needed. That means you need to have a West Virginia medical license. And he'll call it and say, I'm licensed in West Virginia, and I'm a pathologist, and I'll be available this and such time. So then they'll say, okay, well, we're paying this amount of money a day for you to come work. Typically it's paid by the day, per diem. It's all per diem. So we'll pay you $800 a day to come and be a pathologist. We'll pay you every week, and we'll put you up. We'll pay your airfare, we pay your malpractice, and we'll put you up and give you a per diem $50 a day for meals. And so then the guy comes to town, and so part of the contract, they're putting him up. So the guy shows up in town, and they put him up in the local town. We have this place, I just looked it up, I forget what it's called, Townhome Suites or something. An embassy suite, some sort of they'll put them up in a extended stay hotel, and then and the agent, the hospital may be paying the agency $1,500 a day for the doctor, and they're giving him $800 a day, and the difference they use to pay for, out of that difference has to come his hotel room or whatever, and his malpractice, and his or her, I'm being kind of, the physician's, whatever they contracted with, the living expenses, malpractice typically, and then what's left over is profit. So one thing that's very common, I've seen this happen at the hospital I work. They'll get locum tenens people, they'll put them up in, when the people first get to town, they're staying at the extended stay hotel that has the kitchenette and all the swimming pool facilities and all that. Then after they're there about a week, the agency will move them out. They'll move them into an apartment, and that's one of the big strategies they do, is to save. It adds to their profit margin substantially to as soon as they can find a place that's furnished, that has furnished with telephone and laundry facilities, and that's really about it. They'll move the person into that place and get them out of that extended stay high dollar place. And the best price we see in our town for one of those extended stay places is $95 a night. If you stay for a week, you can get one of these for $95 a night. So they're looking to move somebody out of there for less than that, but they're also willing to pay a premium because they're looking for a furnished place, and they're looking for a place that they don't have to sign a long-term lease. So that gives if you are a landlord that's in this market, you can make a premium on your place if you're able to get in this market. And we kind of fell into this. What we're going to do is we're going to find the agent. We want to have our tenant. Hopefully, our tenant will tell us who his temp agent. Our tenant actually isn't a doctor.
He's a physical therapist.
He's a physical therapist. It's not just doctors that do this. It's the same kind of situation happens with nurses, physical therapists.
Speech pathologists is a real big one. Very big. Rehab, skilled nursing facility type of facilities are always looking for rehab therapists of some sort to work with stroke victims, accident victims, things like that.
Yeah, the guy that we have in our property now actually goes from house to house,
and he does in-home stuff.
Yeah,
so that's a huge thing.
Right.
Like
Home
Donnie
health.
was saying, it depends. We're in a very, I don't know if it's a good or bad. We're in a prime location for that type of work because where we live, there's a high amount of elderly, disabled. Our population is not really an up-and-coming, young, growing population, whereas some of the larger metro areas and smaller areas in other states are. So there's a larger need for health care here, long-term health care, and it's probably a greater demand than what the local resources can match. And so that is why the locums it's a big thing here for our population.
So what we're going to try to do is to the whole way the temp work industry, the temporary work industry, it's kind of how it's set up. It's kind of analogous to real estate brokers. There are companies that coordinate this. There's one called Comp Health. There's another one called Staff Care. There's another one called Weatherby Locums, and those are three big ones I know off the top of my head that do physician employment. And so, just like real estate, there will be agents that will work on the side of finding employment for individual physicians, nurses, physical therapists. And then there will also be agents on the other side, and there might be the same agent. There will be agents on the other side of the transaction that are advertising positions for the hospitals. And then these two agents will get together and we'll make a transaction. There will be a closing. There will be a link made there between the supply side and the demand side of this market. So what we want to do, what I think we want to do as landlords that want to get into this business, is to try to identify the agent that is the go-to person for our local hospitals. What I plan to do is to call the physician recruiters at the local hospitals here and see if I can get that information from them. If we can find out who their contact person is, who handles their accounts at Staff Care, Weatherby Locums, Comp Health. Find out which company they work with, which company you'd want to, at your local hospital, you'd want to probably figure out who they call, what company they contact when they have an opening. If it's one or the other, they might use one for nurses, they might use another one for doctors. But we're going to try to find out who their agent, what agent they call, and then if we can contact that agent, we identify that agent and just let that agent know that when he has somebody that comes to town to give us a call, that we will, we have places available for short-term. We want to, offer them our product of a short-term furnished cable, telephone, everything ready for we don't know for what, for somewhere less than what the hotel is doing it for, but
we were thinking maybe half of what the low, because the price range is from what was it, 95 to like 198, which I don't know what 198 a night got you.
Well, I think it was the length, if I'm not mistaken, Donnie. I think you said it was 95 if you signed several nights.
Oh, is that what it was?
Like
Yeah.
Well, it also has to do with how many bedrooms and what's it. They got different kinds of rooms at that place.
Apparently,
rooms there would.
Didn't they have a 2-bedroom?
They did, and they had a special event rate. Now I don't know.
You get a deal if you sign up for more
in our
nights.
town, if there's
Right.
what that special event would be, but
One question I have is, do they typically bring their families, or just usually a single person type thing?
typically it's a single person that is. It may be someone that's just out of school and still single. It may be somebody that actually has a family that is for whatever reason in between jobs. This happens with doctors and nurses. It happens with doctors just as much as everyone else. You can a lot of more and more doctors these days are employees of hospitals, more and more all the time, rather than working for themselves. They're actually employees of hospitals, and they'll get they'll get a job that's not that they'll get in a job that turns out not to be what they wanted it to be. They may have for whatever, just like any company, hospitals are pretty shitty people to work for, quite honestly. They're pretty bad about coming back after a year and telling you that you need to take a 30% pay cut because of your production, or pay your tail and leave. And there's a lot of doctors, there's a lot of good doctors that get screwed over by their employers and will leave, and this is kind of a temporary, and this is a stopgap for there's a great deal of doctors out there that are in a stopgap situation that have families, but typically they'll come by themselves.
Right.
And
I think it's a good way to save money for a lot of people out of school, like you're saying. If you find somebody that's paying for your expenses, housing is expensive. You get an allotment, I think, for food. I mean, that's expensive, and if a lot of these locum tenens will bank that money, and they're like, well, I'm going to do this for 3 years. I mean, and your friend that we know, she would do some on, some off, and she would work again when she needed to, which is a nice setup.
There's really no commitment. It's a short-term commitment.
Right. Yeah. So it's you work as much as you want or need to. You're in control of your own destiny.
And this is something that you might be thinking, you might be listening and saying, well, this isn't a good thing. My town's too small. This doesn't apply to me. I'm telling you, any small rural hospitals are really a lot of what the locum tenens industry serves. My friend that is a surgeon that did locum tenens work for 10 years, worked almost exclusively in northern Minnesota and northern Wisconsin in the middle of winter. Okay, so
Now if they got paid a premium.
Yeah. You might think of that. These are good tenants too. They're not somebody that's going to tear your place up, and they're going to pay a premium.
Yeah, we've talked about this for several years, and when we went on our last mailing campaign, we kind of stayed clear of like 1 and 2 bedroom houses, but keeping this in mind, we might want to focus on that even.
Well, and we've had some success with this.
We've had a lot of success with our 1 and 2 bedroom houses. I mean, some of our most successful properties are 1 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And if we can turn them into these types of properties.
And I think it's interesting, we had a lot of naysayers in the beginning telling us you'll never do anything with those. I mean, people in the industry, why would you want those? This will never amount to anything.
They'll never sell.
You can't get any rent for this.
Right.
We're doing great.
I'd like to have 100 of those.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
so don't let anybody tell you that. There is a market for 1 bedroom. You just have to be creative.
And
I think we're on the cusp of something.
And we don't hear a lot of people talking about renting to these type of people. And one thing that I was concerned about is the quality. I mean, our houses on Oakland are above average. We all realize that. But the quality that these people would expect, I mean, they're not going to have. It's not going to be like something like what we live in, or maybe even not like what they live in at home. But like you said, that's not usually an issue as long as everything's new and.
Well, we found that we have experience with this now with our current tenant.
Right.
When they came, there were some things that they pointed out, and they said, "We need this fixed, and we need it fixed now."
Right.
And what it was, they wanted a dishwasher.
Right.
And they had a pet. Now this is probably a big thing.
Yeah.
If you allow a pet, Embassy Suites or whatever isn't going to be a great place for a pet. They probably wouldn't put up with a pet. But for example, my friend that traveled around the country for 8 years, she had a little dog, and she took her little dog with her, and so they had a puppy, and they needed the yard. They needed a fence. They needed a fence repaired in the backyard for the dog. And then after that, were they pretty much satisfied?
Yeah, we didn't hear from them.
Yeah.
And they actually pay their rent, a day early. I mean, but a lot of times, the Embassy Suites and the hotel or the apartment buildings that accept these kind of arrangements, a lot of times they don't like dogs because they bark and they bother the other neighbors, and the walls are usually pretty thin and that kind of thing, whereas they'll take cats. Having a 1 or 2 bedroom house
with a yard,
that's a selling point.
And catering to these types of people might be a niche that we've talked about this for a long time, but we might want to pursue it even
because
further.
Our two, the ones we have now, they got a choice. Like John was saying, they looked around and they found us. And some locum tenens, I know they don't necessarily give you a choice in housing, or they try to be receptive to your wants and needs. But I was just doing some reading on here, and actually one of the cons for locum tenens is housing. I mean, there's a lot of complaints about this. They put me in this housing and it's awful.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And so I think some places will give you that choice as far as where you want to go, and some will not. Ours were fortunate, though. It sounds like they got a stipend, and they handled it a little bit differently.
But they will put you in houses and places like that. These places, they will.
That's really that's customary. That's customary service for the temporary housing folks. Is when you call them, you don't have to, say, you're that pathologist in South Dakota, and that hospital there, they just told you, the end of the week we don't need you anymore. We hired a pathologist. Okay, so he gets on the internet and pulls up physiciansjobs.com or something, and looks at for under pathology. He might look under pathology, and he'll hit West Virginia. I have a West Virginia license. I'm going to look under West Virginia and see if there's any in West Virginia. And he'll pull it up, and there it'll be, so. But so then when you call the company, they say you don't have to worry about anything. You just show up. If you'll, we're going to pay you this amount, and you just show up and be ready to work on, the 23rd of next month, and we'll have you. We're going to get you a place to stay, and we're going to pay your airfare, and we're going to give you so much to eat a day, and then it's so much a day you get paid, and we cover your insurance, and that's how they work it.
And they will pay a premium. They won't, say we get hooked up with one of those people, they won't expect us just to charge typical like we charge $600 for.
You're trading this flexibility of being able to terminate the contract with no, basically no notice.
It's going to really be plug and play, because you're got to be, if you're going to deal with these, I think typically, you might rent to somebody, and then 10 days later they may pull their contract because they hired somebody, so that's where so they need to have a place that you got to be flexible in that way, that you're willing to rent on a week-to-week basis. That's probably reasonable. But they're not going to want to sign for anything longer than probably a week at a time.
And we haven't touched really on furnishings. I mean, on those plug-and-plays turnarounds, it probably would behoove us to have a place that is already furnished.
Oh, definitely.
Whereas the ones we have now,
they were
it was not
professionals,
furnished,
or are professionals,
and they were here about 3 months.
But we do have a plan to work on that and be ready to turn it around quickly, so that we're going to market it normally, but hope to be able to snag one of these. And if we do, then we're going to quickly.
It'll be
prepare it for somebody that's not going to have their own furniture.
It'll be kind of a neat experiment, and maybe we could blog about this even and talk about it on our website.
Great idea.
But I would like to know at the end of the year is what matters. The balance sheet at the end of the year is what matters. Did we bring in enough money doing that versus had we just rented it at $600 a month? At the end of the year, I mean, was there a trade-off? Was it less aggravation? Was the quality of the tenant better? Was it blah 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 blah? But I'm sure there's going to be times when the unit's going to be empty. By the time we pay someone to go in there and clean it every week, because we don't have to clean it like at the end of the week. We don't have to go and clean it. By the time we have utility expenses, we have to usually we're gonna have to pay the utilities. We have to pay cable, water, electric, gas, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. But then you can charge a premium.
Right. But if we're getting $1,800, I mean, if someone stays in there, it's kind of like renting a vacation home. Maybe we can equate it with that. If we're getting $60 a night, how many nights would we have to keep it rented to get a standard whatever revenue that would bring in a typical year from the typical renter? So if we're getting $600 a month, we're gonna have to get $7,200 a year out of that place to make it worth our while. At least $7,200 a year. So we're gonna have to rent it X amount of times. We're gonna have to keep it occupied. 7,200 divided by 60, 55, or whatever. We're gonna have to gear towards that. A lot of time could slip by thinking that we're doing okay because we have someone on the line when really we're not, because 3 months have slipped by. We've only had 2 weeks of it occupied, and we're behind our revenue expectations. So we'd have to be very careful. We'd have to really do some deep analysis.
We'd have to really have it set up.
Really have a pipe, like you said,
good
a pipe. Talk to these people, find out how they work. You talk to them, and you have the inside knowledge, and figure it all out. Because like we said, we've been interested in this for a long time. But at the end of the day, it's the balance sheet at the end of the year. Did it bring in as much money as if was there a trade-off? Did it bring the same amount of money, but was it less aggravation? Was it, I'm sure these people are going to be less aggravating than...
Really, I think it's going to be the opposite.
You're going to think it would be more aggravating?
Mm-hmm.
The tenants themselves?
Well, I guess in one regard, I think they're going to have certain expectations and small things that, they're going to be bothered by small things. I don't think you're not going to hear about a lot of the typical tenant complaints, but I think there's a possibility. I don't know. I mean, we had a great first example. These tenants were terrific. So it's not.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would be as
common. Isn't it kind of similar to what Donnie said about first class versus coach? He has a friend that was a flight attendant, and he said that the first class passengers were a lot less demanding than the coach passengers.
Right.
I mean, it's not exactly the same thing. But I have found that the higher the rent someone pays, I have found personally, the higher the rent someone pays if you have a decent place, they have jobs, they don't have the time to complain and, gripe, versus someone that's on HUD that has no job, that's on disability.
Yeah.
Rent won't be late.
These people typically...
Late rent.
So what's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that if you're going to hear something, I bet you'll hear something pretty quick if you're going to hear there's a problem. I think if you're ready for them with the heat's working okay, there aren't any water leaks. These people are going to want to come there and sleep, and they're going to want to, so you're not going to want to have a drippy faucet. That's probably that's something that would really annoy them. They're going to want to have a washer and dryer that works and isn't nasty. You're going to want to be able to wash their clothes and be able to get on the internet. They're going to want to have reliable internet service. They're going to want to have a good bed. They're going to want to have a nice bed with a nice mattress. They're going to be sleeping there, and they're going to want to have a microwave. They're going to want to have a nice dishwasher microwave. They're going to need to have dishes. They're going to need to, and that's probably, you're going to want to have their refrigerator clean when they show up. They're not going to, it's not like a tenant moving in that they're going to do a spring cleaning to get set up.
It should be like a hotel room.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And
anything that deviates from the standard, what they would expect at a hotel room, I think you will hear about.
Right.
I don't think you'll hear about the typical
there,
stuff.
Yeah.
Right. If you get those things resolved, I think there shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just speculation.
They're going to also understand that it's not a hotel room. It's not going to look like that. It's not going to have the...
And you're talking about the furnished ones again.
They're not paying hotel room prices for one.
I mean, we're talking about the more furnished on this line of thought, because with the furnished, you would probably have to provide a TV, maybe a DVD player to be comparable, which is fine. Because if they walk, we have to track them.
But what it is the tenant.
But that's good.
It's an interesting situation too, in that the person who's going to rent this place is going to be looking at the price and trying to see if they can get this guy in there and see what they'll tolerate and be able to get away with. Okay. Where the tenant typically won't be the person that rented the place. They're going to be showing up sight unseen. They're going to be, if they're going to be bitching, they're going to be bitching to their agent. They're going to say, what the heck kind of nasty place did you get me into?
Right.
They're going to be calling him, and he's going to, if you're not able to rectify it, they're probably going to, they'll probably pull him out and put him back into the townhome suite or whatever, and say, rather than the guy quitting his contract at the hospital, they're going to say, well, we're going to pull him out of there. So, it's going to have to, you really have to be best foot forward with the agent is the guy that you're going to have to really please, because he won't call you up again if he's going to get a bad name with the with his employee that he brought to town,
Right.
because that community of doctors, there's a whole forum there that they'll communicate around. You know, don't work with John Smith. He'll try to put you into a rat trap and pocket the difference.
So what's to keep them from just always putting them in embassy suites with the nice efficiency that has all the amenities and the pool and all that kind of stuff?
I think money.
Okay, so would the doctors just always complain and always gripe about something? Because you can always find something wrong with the house.
Well,
unless it's a high end, which they're not going to be able to afford that.
Well,
companies
there's some
make money too.
There's some kind of advantage too. I mean, it's when if you were a doctor coming to a town, you might appreciate the hominess of being in your own little house with your own street side parking,
And pets.
and being able to have pets, not being able to I don't know, wash your clothes, walk around your underwear in your little house and not worry about how loud you're playing your music or talking on your phone, and or whatever. It might be a little bit bigger than
privacy, perhaps.
a little more privacy than in a hotel.
But they do. It's the proof's in the pudding. They do put them in houses. They don't always put them in those types of places.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's very, very common. And I think probably most of the people that have been around the track and have done this a couple times they know that they're probably going to get moved to a different place, and they would. So, as long as it's adequate and it's a place where someone can come and sleep without any. I would think if you're going to hear a problem, it'll be like a drippy faucet or some sort of annoying noise. There's I hear a motor running all the time, or something like that.
I guess my
They're not going to ask you to paint.
My primary question,
Right.
I guess my concern or question is, are they motivated to keep the price low too? Is the doctor motivated to have a house that's cheaper versus a hotel room that's nicer? I mean, are they motivated to keep the price down?
That's a good question.
Because these people were motivated because the people that we have in our home now were motivated because they get a stipend. They get $1,000.
Yeah.
They don't know what they get. But they get some kind of large amount.
Yeah.
And they're pocketing the difference. So they're
Some of them
motivated
will-
to keep it.
Some of them will work. Some of them will make their own deal like that. Yeah, and there's a clear motivation there. There's also somewhat of a motivation too, that for if you're a doctor that gets a reputation as being a high maintenance. When you show up at a town, you are very demanding, hard to please, don't accept the accommodations. That company, if you're working for staff care, okay, I don't know this for sure, but I imagine this is probably the case. Like staff care is like one of the big hiring companies that have a big network. And if you get a bad reputation as being high maintenance, that gets in your record among the staff care employee agents, and they might look you over for somebody else if you're not somebody that's willing to play and help them with their bottom line. I mean, these agencies, I think the agencies are, have that in mind too, is they're not going to, they're not going to work, they're not going to play with people that won't play with them. And, and so there is some motivation in that way in order, if you're going to want to come back, if you're going to want to keep a good relationship with this Locum Tenens company, and be able to call them and say, I'm available. What job do you have now? I'd like to, start something up in August. What do you got that's ready to go in August? They're gonna say, oh, that's that troublemaker.
Right.
I'm gonna get him off the phone and
so
not
the
call him back.
the agency's motivated by keeping the costs down low, of course, and the doctor's motivated by wanting to keep their job,
wanting a
their
good
patient of not being
reputation,
high maintenance, and just kind of
be
doing
a
whatever
go-to
to keep
person.
right
That they'll be able to. They'll call the next time and say,
that makes sense then.
well, let's call Joe. He's a pathologist. He's done 3 of these stints with us before.
They don't want some diva coming in there wanting,
Right.
they're going to pass them over. Oh, that makes sense.
Right.
Then. That makes a lot of sense to me. Well, we're going to have to. The air conditioning in the Landlords Journal studios is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really.
I'm burning up. You're
It's-
sweating too, Donnie.
it
John's
is.
sweating.
We're right here, day before Memorial Day.
Never
here
let
at,
them see you sweat.
30 Rockefeller Center. They don't have the
They
air
don't pay
on.
the air conditioning.
And they're raising our rent too.
Okay. All right. So, okay, America. We will talk to you later. Tune in later for another enjoyable.
Yeah, we're gonna follow this.
Fine.
We're gonna experiment with this, and we're gonna actually put our money where our mouth is because we've been wanting to do this for a long time. We're gonna maybe experiment with it. We've had our first. What do I want to say? Our first. It was an accidental. Accidental.
It fell in our
success.
laps, sort of.
Exactly.
We're like, let's do
Exactly.
it.
But I would like to crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful Memorial Day weekend in May of 2011. Be sure to follow our progress on this little project of ours on landlordsjournal.com, and be sure to visit us on landlordsjournal.com and check out our schedule of future podcasts. As we had mentioned earlier, we plan on having a live call-in feature of our show, so be on the lookout for that. If you are on our email list, you will be the first to be notified of this new feature. So be sure to check back on our website for all the latest information on that. We'll be taking questions and comments from fellow landlords, real estate investors, and tenants. So be on the lookout for that. Again, thank you for joining us here on landlordsjournal.com.